My name is Douglas Wilmer, and I represent the World War II Glider Pilots Association. And this is their production of the Invasion of Holland Market Garden. Market is the airborne part of the operation, and the garden is the ground forces part of the operation. This was on the 17th of September through the 25th of September, 1944. It's not our intention to completely cover and report Market Garden, but just to report the American glider effort. Parts of it will be shown, other parts of the operation will be shown to keep the objectives and efforts in complete context. This was by far the most ambitious of all the airborne operations of World War II. It shows the American glider pilot in his true mettle, and he does everything and more that the High Command asked him to do. This operation actually was in three parts and three major areas of responsibility. The first part is the British responsibility at Arnhem. This is the Rhine River, and they are going to drop across the Rhine River into Germany in these areas right here. This is Osterbeek and the landing zones for the British. The American 82nd Airborne Division will be dropped in the Nijmegen area at Oosterbeek, Mook, and Grave, their drop zones. The 101st has the responsibility in the Eindhoven area, and their drop zones are in the Zaan area. On the 17th of September, the front line was here along this canal. The objectives were to grab all the bridges and hold them in each one of these areas, and the British ground forces, led by the Irish divisions and tanks, were to race up this highway across the Rhine into Germany, and the war would be over by Christmas of 1944. Troops have been moved to the airfields from which major airborne effort covers everything from live ammunition to CO2 cartridges for their Mae West life vest. Since this route is going to be over water, the troops will be using life vest. Troops you see here are mostly from the 327th and the 401st Glider Infantry. These were all moved into this airfield on September the 15th, and supplies cover everything. Pinning the American flag on the shoulder is very important. It shows the Dutch that this is an American soldier. Last-minute services are held for the faithful, and of course this is the Catholic chaplain. Troops are leaving the hangar and going to their tow planes. In this case, these are paratroopers, and they are going to the part of the airfield in which they will be boarding airplanes to leave for the invasion of Holland. Q7 on the side of this airplane indicates that it's the 90th Squadron of the 438th Troop Carrier Group at Greenan Commons. Paratroopers are testing everything. This is General Gavin talking to his troops. Paratroopers all getting ready to leave. Many last-minute checks. There are static lines, and checking to see that everything is hooked up properly before they get on board the airplane. These troops are loading up for DZ A, B, and C in the Zaan and Eindhoven area, and the briefing of the airplane crews will cover just about everything that can be briefed, the routes, the radar instructions, information what to do in case of an emergency and they have to ditch, what they have to do if they go down in enemy territory, and above all, last-minute instructions with who they're carrying and where they're going. Flight crews are getting off of the transportation and checking parapacks, checking all their flight surfaces to see that everything that can be checked visually is okay. Airplanes are lined up and ready to go. Some of the first airplanes are off. The pathfinders leave first, and then followed by the paratroopers, and in turn followed by the first serials of gliders. These are formations heading for Holland, and they'll be going through some overcast. 4J represent 305th Squadron of the 442nd Troop Carrier Group. This whole group, their first assignment is to drop paratroopers in the Zon area. Carter is the 82nd and the British paratroopers. The 82nd will be going into DZT and at around Groesbeck, and at DZ0 around Grave. The British will be dropping in the Arnhem area. First paratroopers are down, and they're to hold the ground, take the Germans by surprise as much as they can, try to get hold of the bridges before the Germans have time to blow them. The bridges in this operation are very important. A cameraman has jumped with these troopers, and you'll see as paratroopers are coming down, hitting the ground, and they've pretty much taken the Germans by surprise. Except for flak, there's not too much activity going on. They are shelling Eindhoven to some extent, and they do have heavy artillery not too far away, and this is important, that the paratroopers are very vulnerable when they first hit the ground. As you can see here, they have to put their guns together. Troops are now starting to develop into strong corps of fighting units to take up positions. The Dutch are very helpful, as you see here, and they're quite willing to help show anything that in the way of German forces, where they are, what kind of forces are there, and so forth. The C-47s are taking pretty much of a beating. Here you see one going down in the distance. The paradrop you also see there in the distance. Back in England, the heavy muscle part of the airborne operation is getting ready. The loading of the gliders, bring in artillery pieces, loading jeeps. The glider CG-4A that you see here was built around a glider and 5 men. And here you see them loading one of the jeeps in this glider, and a mate right close to it will be the anti-tank gun. In this case, hopefully they'll land close enough together that the jeep will pull the gun to its assigned position on the ground. Here's checking and rechecking. It has to be done over and over again, because nobody wants to take a chance of something coming loose in flight. Very disastrous results can happen when loads shift in flight. Gliders have to cut loose in most cases, and have to be very careful in lowering this tail so that the tail wheel doesn't fall and break.
Well, I think most of the time they were designed for 3,750 pounds, but I think most of the time they had about 5,000 pounds or so, or maybe more, because on that one and also on the German missions, when we got there and landed, the Jeep sank into the floor of the glider. And I'm sure the glider was designed to hold up to 3,750 with no sinking into the plywood floor.
Right. 7s and CG-4As are ready for takeoff in England. This is the first day's operation, and there will be a number of gliders to each one of the American divisions, plus a heavy glider mission to the British up in the Arnhem area. The writing and the graffiti on the side of the gliders pretty much speaks for themselves, and a great deal of effort in some cases were made to put the writings that you see here on the side of the gliders. And the humor, the American humor, is something else. General McCollop shows his support for this element of the division by going in gliders and riding in a glider into Holland, and he's towed by the senior commander, troop carrier commander in the European theater, Colonel Whitaker. And off, the 300-foot of tow rope is playing out, and the glider is up on its nose and then down until it gets some airspeed. It has very little surface control on its air surfaces. But the glider will take off first. It flies around 65 miles an hour. It takes off and gets above the tow plane. The tow plane will take off about 95 miles an hour. The formation that you see here takes a while to form up, and the glider pilots are flying without co-pilots, and this is going to average out to be about a 3-hour flight. And it's very exhausting on the glider pilot to be able to fly this long a period of time without any relief whatsoever, because he has to fly that glider continuously. There's no way of resting. There's no automatic pilot, and in most cases the airborne that's sitting beside him in the co-pilot seat has no flying training at all. And so the pilot will be flying this glider for 3 hours, forming.
Well, Holland, of course, was the longest. Yeah, it was over 4 hours.
Formations are very vulnerable to the enemy fighter craft, and passing over some of the Belgium and Dutch towns. Here's an airborne officer sitting in the co-pilot seat. The weather's a little borderline. The takeoffs were delayed 4 hours before they were able to get off. Here we are in Holland. These planes or gliders are down. Most of them have made very soft landings, and more gliders coming in, as you can see here in a distance. '50 gliders are going in first into the 82nd drop zones up in the Groesbeck area, and then 50 gliders are going into the Zahn area in the 101st area of responsibility. Not too much flak right at the landing zones, but getting to the landing zones is where flak was experienced in great amounts in this particular operation. Gliders are coming in very nicely. They had large fields, and they're flying in around 70 miles an hour. These are flying in around 70 miles an hour, touching down probably around 60. The pathfinders on the ground have set up smoke to give them wind direction, and very much like these glider pilots train in America with fields with barbed wire fences. The glider pilots are staying with the troops. This is a case in which the nose has come open, was unhooked probably in flight, and the nose was started up before they actually stopped rolling, and that's what caused that to happen. The Dutch are very excited. This is the greatest day that they have experienced in many a year. They've been waiting 5 years for relief from the Germans, and in this part of Holland, they're very, very elated. A Jeep has gotten itself in one of the very many ditches that go through the fields here in order to drain the fields, and I'm sure with all this help that Jeep didn't stay in that ditch very long. This is one of the few accidents that happened. Two gliders collided in air over top of the drop zone. This is one. The other one, the glider pilot was killed. This one, you can see him with his flak suit still on, and it's in a way relay. The glider pilot is hurt here, and the 101st troopers are trying to get he and the boy who flew in the co-pilot seat out of this pinning glider. It takes a little bit of doing, but an axe will do it, and these are steel frames, and the plexiglass has already been knocked out, and glider pilot is being extracted. Luckily, the Germans are not in evidence on the drop zone, or this would have been an impossible situation. Black suit on?
No.
You didn't go into Holland with a black suit?
No, I did. Well, I had one, but I sat on it. I did not wear it. Yeah, I sat. No, I did not wear it.
Did any particular reason why you didn't put it on? Or?
I thought that I would, if I probably got anything, it would be from the ground. And so I put it under my rear end and my feet more than I did in back, because I figured, I didn't think I was expecting too much from flak towers as I would be from ground fire from flying over. Because when they briefed us, if you recall, we left England going east over the North Sea and went down across the border. And when we were crossing into Holland, I figured even though it was enemy territory, there would be very few people that would be shooting at you from a flak tower. So I took a chance and thought if I got any ground fire at all, it would be from underneath. That's the reason why I did it. No other than that, it was just a pure lucky guess. I did not get shot at. My glider was not hit, to my knowledge, by any ground fire after I landed. I did not notice any holes in my glider when I landed.
The medics are very much in evidence in this whole operation, and the Jeeps have been ready for this for a long time. Dutchtown, first part of the operation, the Dutch were going to church, and this looks like church is over with, and some medical units are going through town. This is probably Eindhoven, or could be Zaan, in that area, because these are 101st troopers, medical troopers. Now this is the 82nd area up in the Nijmegen area, and plasma, as in every war, is much in demand. And the Dutch have opened up all their hospitals, their schools, every place that could be used as a hospital, and doctors and nurses are very much in evidence. And you'll notice that there are quite a number of German prisoners waiting for medical attention here also. For some of these men, they'll be patched up and be right back in the thick of things in a day or two. Others will be evacuated just as soon as transport gets up the highway. And the highway is open back to Belgium, that these all be transported back. Even though there was an airfield right close to Nijmegen, it was not discovered until a few days later. C-47s could have landed and brought in supplies and soldiers and taken out the wounded, like was done in Normandy around St. Mary-le-Lys. General McCollop and his staff putting together all the information on the CPs and getting things in order. Neat corps of fighting troops are now being assembled and taken off for the areas where they're needed the most. The Germans were not surprised very long. They stay in there and start working at it. Within a few hours after the first glider, which took off, some gliders landed in the German area, and against orders, one officer did take in a complete set of plans marked with all the objectives, zones, timing zones, landing zones, and the Germans had this within a few hours after the gliders landed. So they knew pretty much where to cut the roads, where to put their most effort, even though
our CG-4A, how it's tall at the top and it's safe down and narrow at the bottom. On the Holland invasion, if you recall, I was carried in a Jeep full of medical supplies. And the only way, if you recall, getting out of that thing without staying there and having the nose up is to crawl on your stomach and back out. Well, the airborne infantry guy had got out and kicked out that emergency door. So I was the last guy out. I was crawling on my stomach, backing out that door. And I ended up with my rear end in that door. And at that time, I weighed 145 pounds, and I wasn't fighting. But I felt like that my rear end had a bull target. And every German had his... And I'll tell you, I still went around kind of pucker up, because I really truly thought every German bastard up there was going to shoot me right in the rear end.
As I said before, the Dutch are very helpful. The Dutch underground, very efficient and do a great job. Not only doing this mission here, but all during the war, before and after this mission. Dutch are passing out some apples, and the guys are all very happy to get them. You notice some British troops involved here. The British have started linking up from the Belgium front lines. This is the first German parachute army, which is responsible for the Eindhoven area, and the rumors of counterattacks and tanks leads everybody to dig foxholes. This is the end of the first day, and it looked very good. The drops were almost perfect. During the night, Eindhoven was heavily bombed by the German Air Force, and this is some of the results of that bombing. Something with ammunition in it has been hit and is burning, and many of the buildings have been hit and are burning. This is deep. It's one, and this was the first large glider mission is getting ready to go. In fact, 1,205 gliders will be put into the air. However, it has to be postponed 4 hours due to fog and bad weather in the morning. The more writings on the side of the gliders, and George F. Brennan, who will have a bad day before this is over. Some other glider pilots with a mascot. The D-ring that fits in the back of the tow plane, and then the D-ring that fits in the glider. 300 feet of tow rope will stretch between the two. They're using single tows on the Holland mission. In the States, however, everybody has been trained on double tows. And if they had to use double tows on this mission, it probably would have been much better. They would have delivered all their troops at one time. As it is, what's supposed to take 3 days will stretch into 6 days of getting them into Holland. Weather starts turning bad about here and goes into the next day, which is supposed to be the last glider mission, is postponed for three additional days. These are some good pictures of glider takeoffs. Gliders have a habit of being overweight, being overloaded, and even though the glider pilot watches and tries to keep that from happening, troops will sneak in, particularly those who have been in combat before, continually run out of things, and mostly ammunition. And extra box or two of ammunition weighs a little bit. What kind of mission did the Holland turn out for you?
Well, it was a long tow. We were about 2 hours and 45 minutes on tow out of England, and we had a lot of ground fire and light flak going into the drop zone. We went in at, I believe it was Nijmegen.
Nijmegen.
And
82nd?
With the 82nd, yes. And I had primarily troops with me that time, and I carried a trailer for a Jeep. Besides, I think probably 10 or 11 paratroopers.
They're averaging over 3 hours in flight, and some pretty good shots of tow planes and gliders together. Gliders are on the way in this case, and again you'll see all kinds of landings, but mostly good ones. Here are a couple of gliders coming in together, and probably one has a Jeep and the other one has a trailer or an anti-tank gun in it. And they try to stay close like that so that that they can get into action as quickly as possible. These are probably fields there at the Zahn area, and glider coming in with his spoilers on, slowing him up and coming on in.
fields are large, and there'll be room for more gliders in behind these. And that was the design. Germans in this area are laying off with mortars and 88s down in the best area, and as the gliders and tow planes are coming in, if they make a turn coming in or going out over the best area, they're really clobbered by the anti-aircraft fire. And until the 327th gets in, the airborne doesn't have enough clot to knock out the best area. They do a little bit later on, but this is the good bit of the 327th is being delivered here in the Zon area. That's the 101st area, and they are bringing in much needed troops as well as supplies. The gliders will bring in a great deal of supplies, landmines, ammunition, and the things to carry them. Jeeps. Jeeps are very important in the airborne. It gives them the only mobility that they're able to muster, and it was.
And of course, Market Garden, as you remember there, we there again had a bad experience for the simple reason when our squadron hit the channel, you couldn't get through. The weather was bad, and most of them turned back, but the commanding officer of the 81st Squadron took us on through, and there was only about 6 out of the 30-some-odd gliders got into Holland from the 81st Squadron because of the weather.
Pretty badly with bombings, as well as the Germans turning loose on them now, and these are areas of almost complete devastation. Soldiers are buried where they were killed.
Now, the tow ship is the one that took the beating there. He was beat up bad and engine out, tail almost off. The flak was hitting him every time we turned around, but he limped back to Brussels.
The flak in Market Garden was pretty bad, I take it.
I'd say, with the exception of the trip across the Rhine, the flak in Market Garden was the roughest, because it was just solid, and I guess that's the reason we didn't make it, because I know when we got on the ground in Eindhoven, and I did have infantry then. I believe that was 101st we took into there, and I stayed with them until we got to Nijmegen.
There's one chute comes out, the second chute comes out, but not the whole crew does not get out of that C-47. And a little bit further on, you'll see another one coming straight in. In the best area, they're really being knocked pretty good by the German gunners. The gliders that are coming in are, here's C-47 coming straight in. One of the glider pilots, Dale Oliver, is pinned to the ground by one of those C-47s and barely escapes with his life.
In Holland, I had a staff sergeant who was the sergeant of the squadron who flew co-pilot with me.
Did you try to teach him anything about flying before you took off?
Well, the first thing I asked him, did he think he could handle this thing as we was going through there, and he took hold of it for me and he said, no, I don't want any part of this. So, no, I didn't have any help there, because he didn't know the first thing about flying. But they were courageous. As a matter of fact, the wind had knocked a hole in the fabric of the glider before we got into Holland, and even the troopers we had, the infantry squadron, they were brave people, because I was afraid that the fabric was going to be torn off of that aircraft, but we had one that got up and even got a hold of the fabric to hold it.
Unbuckled his seatbelt?
Unbuckled his seatbelt.
Holland was the worst mission for me.
And it was a CG-4A?
Yeah, CG-4A.
Did you have a co-pilot?
No, had an airborne sergeant. I never had a co-pilot again.
Did the glider perform okay? Had it been flight tested?
Mine did better. I was glider engineering officer of the squadron.
Oh, I see. Did your squadron try to test fly all the...
I test flew most of the gliders that we worked on myself.
And did you get a lot of ground power going into Holland?
Not as much. We did right at the LZ, but the worst part about Holland was the weather. When we took off from Welford Park, we had clear weather until we hit the channel, and then all of a sudden it was gone. And the tow plane, all I could see was about 5 feet of rope out in front of me. I could not, that's about all. It was just practically dense.
Well, that's interesting. How did you keep on tow? By the angle of the tow rope?
I am not too sure of the answer to that, because
it was single tow.
It was a single tow, thank goodness. And while we were in the stuff, it seemed like we were in there for hours, but I know we weren't. It was only a matter of minutes, because he was climbing as fast as he could. We went into the stuff in formation, in the regular V formation. While I was in there, we hadn't been in there more than a few minutes, and the glider wing came right across in front of him, right there. Another glider.
How close do you think it was?
He couldn't have been more than 10 feet up in front of me. He brushed my rope. The glider wing. Well, I knew if I saw that wing that the other part of him was over there someplace. I knew also there was 2 tow planes up there close together, and that's what had me worried. And frankly, I was sweating because I didn't know whether we were going to make it or not. Well, next thing I know, the other glider never showed up again. And what happened up in front with the airplanes, I don't know. I don't know where they went. But when we finally popped out of the stuff, we were possibly 10,000, 12,000 feet, which was much higher than our allotted flying altitude. We were the only plane in the sky.
Glider flights are in 252 B-24s in a low-level resupply mission, and they come in very much like the troop carrier planes, not having any previous experience. They just use the troop carrier experience in bringing in gliders and paratroopers. These are canisters that are parachuted in from the bomb bays. There's a great deal of loss in these flights. Some of them land completely in the German occupied areas, and in the 82nd area, with the help of the Dutch, they're able to get 80% of theirs. But in the 101st area that you see here, a good bit of this lands into the German occupied guards, that they're called, and they're the largest tank that the British have. But the 2 Panzer divisions that are in the area for refitting and not known that they were there are now starting to be felt. The Germans are good soldiers, and they're only delayed momentarily, and even their second and third-rate soldiers fight very well in this mission. The bridge over Nijmegen is finally taken with a great deal of loss of the American paratroopers. A dike being held, again, the Nijmegen area, and the drop zones are in Groesbeck and Mook and Grave in this area. The Germans are now sending in reinforcements from the areas around, and
in Holland, I was a flight serial leader. I went in on the 3rd phase. We were grounded for 5 days because of weather, and you know how it is, sweating out 5 days, getting up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Finally, we got off after 4 or 5 days, and I let in a flight leader of 25 gliders. Colonel Monroe was the tow pilot, and there was approximately a 50-mile stretch of gliders behind us, which I didn't know at the time. The weather was nothing to brag about. We went over the channel, flying through scattered clouds, and it was over Holland in the flat country near Idaho where we began to take a lot of flak. Of course, we had very good air cover. We had fighter Typhoons, P-47, various types of fighter planes. And near Uden, U-D-E-N, I took a hit in my glider. The wings sound like something going through it, just rocked the whole ship. And number 3 glider and plane in my formation, they got a direct hit, and the plane was seen going down, the glider cut, and then we lost a second glider further on near Idaho, I believe it was.
Glider serials are sweating it out, as Connie has just mentioned. The V4 on the airplane indicates it's the 304th Troop Carrier Squadron of the 442nd Troop Carrier Group. We've seen quite a bit of of that group in these pictures. Waiting is really a tough part of this operation for these troops. They were supposed to go in on D+2, and they're now at D+6. But they are now getting ready to go, and the weather's cleared up enough for them to start getting in. The troops are loading gliders. The crews are being briefed, and some gliders are moving in the takeoff position, and before long they will be forming up. It takes quite a little while to form into formation, so the first gliders off fly in a circle until the other ones take off and catch up to them. The ever-present ambulance is at takeoff. This is 4J again. That's the 442nd, and this is the 305th Troop Carrier Squadron of the 442nd Troop Carrier Group. These scenes were actually shot by a glider pilot that took his camera overseas with him. That's how we have these color pictures. Troops are now coming into Holland, and there's been a lot of landings so far, and these will be the last glider landings in the Holland mission. But resistance has been getting more and more. Here's a glider that's pretty well shot up, as you can see.
As soon as we started to drop down into Holland, it was all small arms fire. 30 and 40, I guess 50 caliber stuff was coming at us. And my glider was hit many, many times with small arms fire. Then the stuff really started hitting the tow planes that were coming in one at a time. They were coming in not in formation anymore. They were just coming in from all directions. They had evidently run into the same thing. And the fire was coming up pretty heavy then. And in fact, one tow plane was hit and landed not too far from us, completely gone. Amazingly, that glider, when we looked at it a little later after everybody got out of it, looked like a sieve from small arms fire, but nobody in the glider got hit.
And you notice here that these troops have come through flak, and most of them have flak wounds. The exploding flak really really does go everywhere. And of course, you can see he's been hit 2 or 3 times. And the only thing that the medics can do here is just bandage the wounds and then get them to an aid station where the doctor will decide whether or not to remove the flak or leave them in. There's many a glider pilot and many a glider trooper who are carrying around flak today that has decided just to leave it where it was. Again, the Dutch are providing not only medical facilities, but the Dutch women have been cooking, and for a GI to get a home-cooked meal in the middle of a war is almost unbelievable. And using good Dutch china as well.
Flew into Grossbeck. Yeah.
First day, second day?
We were in the 3rd day, I believe it was.
What did you carry into Holland?
I carried full infantry load as 14 infantrymen myself.
You didn't have any football?
No. When we first got on the ground in Holland, we set up an outpost on a railroad cut in between one of the infantry units and the engineer unit.
The planes, the tug pilots, added about another 500 feet to our 1,200-foot altitude. And so when I came over to Moss River to our landing ZO in Graaf, Holland, I decided I had to use my drag chute. And we got into the area very good. We all made safe landings outside the tube.
So you came in about 1,800 feet then, or?
We came in approximately 1,700 feet, which was way high, but we did hit the landing zone.
The last one of the glider missions, and this is all up in the 82nd area. Most of the gliders in this 6th day was the 325th Glider Infantry belonging to the 82nd, they were so badly needed at the time that they finally got in. They went right to frontline positions. Checking a parapack, which is a package of supplies which can be released from the cockpit of this C-47. This is another one of the squadrons of the 442nd Troop Carrier Group, and this is the 306 Squadron. And many of these pilots have been over Holland 3 or 4 times already on different missions, dropping troops, pulling gliders, resupply, and this is a resupply mission. The supplies are badly needed at this time, inasmuch as a good many of them have been fallen into German hands. Troop carrier pilots usually do a much better job of resupplying than bomber pilots like the B-24 pilots that you saw a little while ago. The secret of supplies is of air supply is to try to get them all in one central area, so it doesn't take so many troops to round them up. Troops in this case are needed so badly to defend the perimeters and so forth that they can't spare very many of them to gather in the supplies. The Dutch do yeoman duty in helping to round up supplies and bring them into the American command post. Overhead protection again, and now you see Devil's Highway, or Hell's Highway, I should say, down there below, and crowded, things going up, coming back. These troops are on the way home, our airplanes on the way home, and the mission is
Was this Operation Market Garden a success? Well, yes and no. The major objective of Arnhem and the bridges across the Rhine was not met. But every objective given the American airborne was successfully completed. That was the 82nd and the Eindhoven area. The American airborne had met every one of these objectives, and here are some of these statistics. 1,618 American gliders were landed, 10,374 troops were landed, 1,600 tons of cargo was carried by glider, 710 jeeps were put in Holland, along with 465 trailers. 140 artillery pieces were put down. The Americans also jumped in over 20,000 paratroopers in their areas of responsibility. The casualties, there were only 133 glider landing casualties, and there was 233 paratrooper landing casualties. The airplane crews that carried the troops in suffered 89 killed and missing. There were 12 glider pilots killed, 37 injured, and 65 missing. Of those 65 that were missing, they overflew into the German area and were captured. And most of these spent the war in German prison camps. So a 50-mile corridor was won from Belgium up here to above Nijmegen, but it went nowhere. But the Americans did do a fantastic job. The American gliders, the pilots and soldiers in these gliders, in spite of exceptionally bad weather and flying long, exhausting tows without co-pilots, troops and weapons were delivered, they were reinforced, they were resupplied. Yes, from the American standpoint, this operation was a bravely successful one.